Right.
Good afternoon, everyone. If you could give me a thumbs up if you can hear me loud and clear. Awesome, awesome. I can't see everyone on the screen. If I'm looking up, it's not because I have a stiff neck. It's because there's actually a big screen up on the wall. First of all, I'm Brian Eglash. I'm Chief Development Officer and Senior VP here at the Federation. And I'm here with two of my esteemed colleagues, Alexis and Dan, who will introduce themselves a little bit further on. As you know, today's focus is really building on the conversation, and I'm sure many of you were on the previous noon program. That this is all around crisis as a catalyst for deepening and sustaining our donor relationships. And we'll get explore a little bit deeper into what we do here at Federation, some of our successes over the years, and really because of our interdisciplinary approach, it's really helped us fuel growth in both our annual campaign, our foundation development, supplemental campaigns, as well as we begin to engage more families and individuals in their philanthropy and using us as the center for their philanthropy. So as many, every community in the country has experienced at least one major crisis in the last few years. In our community, it's been a little bit more unique because we had two monumental crises in less than 2 years. And within the last 3 years, we not only had a massacre at our Tree of Life building in our backyard, a global pandemic like all of you, and then some other crises like the Ukraine war and war in Israel. It's really been quite a lot. So you'll hear from my colleagues of how our FRD team of our federation tapped into its ingenuity and resiliency, along with our, as I mentioned, our interdisciplinary team approach. And it's really helped us in our fundraising. Many of you have been maybe in the field for more than a few years, may remember prior to 2018, and at least for us prior to that October 27th day, there was a lot of chatter both locally, nationally, etc., about the relevancy of Federation, especially the relevance of the annual campaign and the way we as a Federation and so many of yours have stepped up since that moment, and especially since the pandemic and all these other crises. It, to me, has really shifted the focus and really deepened the importance of what we call collective impact, or really the essence of collective giving. So shortly after the massacre at the Tree of Life building, we had a mantra, and we continue to say it today, and is that we were there on October 27th, only a few hundred feet away from the Tree of Life building. While the murder was in the building, we were out there organizing, strategizing, and implementing our Jewish communal response. Only because we were here on October 26th, 25th, 24th, and 100 years prior, doing what we always do, strengthening our community. And at the end of the day, relationships matter. No one can do this vast amount of work to bring our key agencies together, lead strategy, raise and provide funds, and execute planning strategies that will have profound impact both locally and globally. Really, I truly believe only through Federation you can accomplish this. So I would also be remiss not to mention foundation. That's the bedrock of our future. Without endowments, especially legacy endowments, such as PACEs or loges, our future is unstable. And throughout this period of unimaginable crises that I've just discussed, we have not shied away at all from plan giving and endowment. We in Pittsburgh, as mentioned earlier, have an integrated development department. We take a holistic approach towards our donor cultivations, whereby we often make multiple asks in the same meeting. We talk to them about the campaign, we talk to them around foundation, talk to them about tax credit programs that we have. In some cases, if they're major donors and we know they can dig deeper, We talk to them about supplemental giving. And, you know, that's been really helpful in us maximizing our total resources raised. So the ultimate goal is for us to be their center for Jewish philanthropy. And now via our strategic plan, we're continuing to evolve, and we'll be able to touch on the vision regarding what we want to do around a center for philanthropic impact. It'll either be in the Q&A or if not before. So without further ado, I really want to turn this over to Alexis and then to Dan. We'll dive deeper into the successes with Campaign Foundation and the other streams during these incredibly challenging times.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian, and good afternoon, everyone. As Brian mentioned, my name is Alexis Polikoff. I'm our Director of Development and Community Campaign. I wanted to first start with this quote by Van Gogh. I really love this reminder that small things, which in this discussion I take to mean small gifts, leads to great success. Campaigns, whether they're annual or created for a crisis, are bolstered and strengthened by those who are giving in these lower giving nodes. And take our 2021-2022 community campaign, for example. We had a record-breaking year, and we raised over $14 million for our community campaign. For a little bit of context as well, we have about 50,000 Jews in Pittsburgh, and this number is just helpful to keep in mind as I'm discussing some of these numbers, and also for you to think about your own communities as well. So on the left, you'll see the number of gifts by giving node, and you'll see that the brown slice is by far the largest. There's over 1,100 gifts from those who gave in our lowest bracket, which is $1 to $364. As seen on the right, this same giving tier, again shown with a sliver of brown there, gave more total dollars than those giving in the $365 to $999 nodes. Again, really just showing the power of these small gifts. This lowest giving node contributed almost $142,000 to our community campaign. And one of the things that I really focus on with both my professional and lay leader teams is consistent messaging. Brian also just touched on this as well. This slide here really succinctly says and shows who we are. In times of crisis, the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh is here to help locally and abroad. We bring together community organizations to identify needs and solve problems, coordinating Jewish agencies to help people recover. The where, we help people locally and abroad. The what, we bring together community organizations. We're the ones who coordinate so agencies don't have to. And the why, to identify needs and solve problems to help people recover. We use this messaging throughout all of our materials, including our website, direct mail, e-blasts to the community, and informational marketing pieces. And Dan's going to talk more about the Tree of Life massacre and our response, but I did want to share this quote from Jeff Finkelstein, our president and CEO. The Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh will work in the coming days and weeks alongside our many community partners, Jewish agencies and synagogues, to bring the Jewish community and all of Pittsburgh together to mourn, to help those affected and to heal. We are stronger than the tragedies that befall us because we are strong together. He again reiterates key messaging I just discussed. We were able to respond so quickly, both financially and with other resources, because we are already there. We had the relationships with different agencies, and we were well adept at bringing together the necessary organizations. The community trusted us because we've been clear about our goals and how we're able to support. And as we all know, in March of 2020, things changed yet again. COVID-19 created an unknown and frankly very scary and different world. It forced all of us to think differently and creatively to be successful. And this infographic is from September of 2021, so just about a year old. And our total raised is actually closer to 10 million, but it does give a nice representation of what we raised and what it went towards. We were able to do this in raising 10 million to support the community without cannibalizing the community campaign. And we did this in a few ways. Our messaging remained clear. We're here to help and solve problems. We were really strategic with the donors that we asked to contribute to COVID relief and for how much. And we also really got creative. Like so many businesses, we really had to shift how we went about our day. Our regular in-person meetings changed to Zoom and Teams, and when donors no longer wanted to meet indoors, we invited them to go on a walk or sit on the porch. And our staff checked in with constituents in new ways. Rather than some of the usual solicitation meetings, we really focused on well-being. There were many more phone calls and how are you doing? What do you need? Rather than what we, the Federation, needs. And really by going beyond these traditional staff donor interactions, we're able to strengthen these relationships and instill continued trust. We also really got creative with how we supported the community. We paid for rapid testing at camps so that the families wouldn't have that additional cost. We paid for additional technology for seniors so that they could communicate with their families on iPads since the families were no longer able to visit in person. We saw the needs and figured out how to take on these costs ourselves so our partner agencies wouldn't have to hold that burden. Unfortunately, we know that crises arise and we must be there to support. When the war in Ukraine started, it became apparent that we needed to open a special fundraising portal. We did this quickly and put out strong messaging. And here's just a piece from one of the first e-blasts to the community. Federation and our global partners are providing ongoing support to meet the immediate needs of vulnerable Jews: food, medicine, home care, and heating supplies to withstand the country's harsh winter, safety check-ins with homebound seniors and Holocaust survivors, support for community centers, synagogues, and Jewish organizations. These are just, a few key pieces. We mentioned vulnerable Jews. We give specific examples of how donors' contributions help. We're again positioning ourselves as providers of necessary help to those in need. And by remaining consistent with our messaging, we again strengthen trust in the community. And at the beginning, I discussed the importance of small gifts, and I'd like to end with that as well. These graphs here show the almost $1.8 million that we raised for the Ukraine emergency relief. Again, the lowest node, those giving between $1 and $364, made up almost 3/4 of our donors to this emergency fund. You can see that these donors also on the right-hand side contributed almost double the amount of those that are in the green and the more lighter blue categories, which are actually higher giving nodes. But again, our lowest node contributed almost $70,000 to our overall amount. And this again really just shows the power and importance of small gifts. We spend a lot of our time focusing on major donors, which will always remain a priority. I do encourage you though to think about stewarding your smaller dollar donors. They're the ones already engaging in your e-blasts and social media and direct mail. By using your existing messaging, you can create personalized messages. And donors who give year after year, and especially to these special or emergency funds, are really immensely important. So thank you all so much. And I'm now pleased to introduce Dan Brandeis.
Thank you, Alexis. And I'm starting off with a quote that I'm sure many of you have heard: "What got you here won't get you there." And I think our federation, like many of your communities, probably have thought the same thing, that the way the Federation used to operate is not the way we need to operate going forward if we want to secure a vibrant community in the future. When I first, and by way of background, I came to the Federation about 20 years ago, and I've been working at the foundation here ever since. But in the first month that I came to the Federation, I went to a JF&A conference where the topic was integrated fundraising. It was a buzzword then, as it is now. Everybody was talking about how we could be more integrated in how we approach donors. The Federation, prior to my arrival, had just undertaken a strategic plan with the RAND Corporation to really try to understand how we could break down the silos within our own organization so that we could be a more collaborative fundraising organization. But that plan and a few strategic plans that followed it, faced many challenges. Primary among them are that federations are 100-year-old organizations that have been used to doing things in a certain way, and there's a lot of inertia with that. Most recently, though, we have undertaken another strategic plan that has actually resulted in changes that we're implementing now, and we expect to have strong results in the future. Looking back again 20 years ago, the numbers were very different. And one of the important ones was the number of volunteer solicitors that we had involved with the Federation. At that time, we had about 250 volunteer solicitors who did yeoman's work with the annual campaign, undertaking the vast majority of all of our solicitations. And at that time, people gave to the Federation because they felt an obligation to do it. It was their Jewish tax. In fact, the chairman of the board 20 years ago told a story about how when he was a kid, his parents would read him a bedtime story. They'd make him take a spoonful of castor oil, and they'd tell him he needed to give to the Jewish Federation when he got older. And while he was joking about that, although not the castor oil, he said they really gave that to him. People thought of the Federation, as the medicine that they had to take. It was the thing they had to do. But today, people don't think of us in that way, and we need to change to account for that reality. As Brian was saying, there have been a number of crises, and I'm just looking at the past 20 years. There have been actual conflicts like the Intifada, the war in Lebanon, and of course, recently, what's going on in Ukraine, things that we have to respond to. And there's also been community issues. Here in Pittsburgh, one of the big ones was Jewish cemeteries. We found that there were over 100 Jewish cemeteries in Western Pennsylvania, a number of which were indigent and needed help. And the Federation undertook efforts to right those cemeteries, make sure that they were financially stable and being taken care of. Also, prior to the shooting at the Tree of Life, the Federation realized that there was an increase in anti-Semitic acts. Our partner beneficiary agencies and organizations were concerned about security, and Federation, which really is in a unique position to pull together diverse organizations and parts of our community to solve these problems, undertook an effort to figure out what we could do. And we created a security position for Pittsburgh to look at our community and help protect us. But of course, as Brian mentioned, there were very recent significant crises that we've had to deal with. The first was the Tree of Life massacre. And as Brian said, this was just a horrific time, but the Federation demonstrated tremendous leadership when this happened. As Brian mentioned, literally while the shooter was in the building, the Federation had employees on site and was already organizing with our partner agencies, not just in the Jewish community, but also in the general community where we had longstanding relationships. And our efforts on behalf of the community and addressing the needs that emerged were recognized by the greater Pittsburgh community, but certainly the Jewish community. Likewise, with the COVID response, when the pandemic hit, the Federation became the central place that our beneficiary agencies, our synagogues, and other Jewish organizations looked to get help with what was going on. The Federation was uniquely able to help agencies apply for PPP loans and other things, and also get the services that they needed. So in those two instances, as well as other crises, the Federation really emerged as the central address for the Jewish community. Today, things are different at the Federation. One particular difference, which I'm sure we're not unique with respect to, is the number of volunteers who are involved with solicitations. On the downside, I mentioned we had 250 dedicated volunteer solicitors 20 years ago. Today, that number is around 80. While that's been a significant decline, the way the Federation has addressed that is by engaging a dedicated team of development professionals here at the Federation. And now a large percent of our solicitations are done professionally. And that has allowed us to deepen our relationships with donors to not just focus on the annual campaign, but also on raising money for Pennsylvania tax credits, which are a unique product that we have here in Pennsylvania that support our Jewish schools, and also supplemental gifts and other corporate sponsorships. We have really undertaken an interdisciplinary approach to our fundraising, where we look to our planning department to assess the needs in the community, and then to our marketing department to help communicate what those needs are and how the Federation can address them. As I mentioned earlier, we've also undertaken a significant strategic plan and taken action to implement that plan, where we are redoubling our efforts to ensure that all development professionals not only are responsible for the campaign, but all of our streams of fundraising. And our response to these crises has really deepened our relationship with our donors, and it's broadened the understanding in the community of what the Federation means. A couple case studies of, where I think it explains how things have changed recently and how donors look at us are things that I'd like to talk about. But first, being a survivor, literally a survivor of Germany whose family left the day after Kristallnacht, who had been supporting our Federation for decades, became very interested in the Federation recently, and recently being, let's say, the last 10 years. And as our relationship developed, he understood how the Federation was addressing the needs in the community. And most particularly with our response to the shooting and what was happening with COVID, this donor, who had been considering a legacy gift, really decided that the Federation was the right place to make a significant testamentary gift. And he was convinced that the Federation could handle crises, and also that he was not going to be able to predict what those crises were. So as he established the gift, he decided to leave it unrestricted, knowing that the Federation would be able to best steward those dollars years into the future. Another example is of a non-Jewish donor and fund holder who also grew up in Europe during World War II and had an interest in supporting the Jewish community. When the crisis happened with the Tree of Life shooting, she reached out to me and we talked about what she could do to help. And recognizing the role of the Federation, and that was really the central organization that can help the Jewish community, she decided to leave her entire estate to the Jewish community through the Federation Foundation to support our efforts. And the last example I would give you is of a major donor family that's been involved with the Federation for 3 generations, that established a private foundation about 40 years ago to accomplish their philanthropy. Given the recent events and our response to crises, this family worked with us to change their private foundation to become an endowment fund at the Federation, where they and their children would be able to work with the Federation to help understand the needs as they arise and make grants accordingly. But what was really important about that is that they understood that acting alone, they really weren't able to understand the needs as the Federation could, or allocate the dollars as effectively as they might. So they worked with us to do that. As you can see, we've sort of moved to what Brian was talking about in terms of being a center for Jewish philanthropy. The Tree of Life shooting took place in a building that houses the Tree of Life congregation, but also 2 other congregations who meet there. And when the shooting happened, there were a lot of funds received, and there was a lot of questions about how to allocate the funds among the congregations. And given our work in the community, those congregations looked to the Federation to establish a committee and determine how to divide those funds and use those funds for the benefit of the community. Additionally, all the congregations set up separate funds within our foundation because they trusted us to manage their money and ensure that it would be there for the future. The example that I gave of a donor family moving a private foundation to our Federation Foundation is just one of a number of families that have done that in the last several years. It's really been remarkable to see that families that have looked to do charitable giving on their own have now decided that they would like to partner with the Federation because of its impact. And in terms of fundraising, the Federation here in Pittsburgh has about 50,000 Jews, so you can equate that to what Alexis was talking about our fundraising totals, but that also relates to our foundation as well. In the past 2 years, we've raised about 25 million a year, 50 million in the last 2 years. That's given all the uncertainty about the financial markets and COVID. Those two fundraising totals represent 2 of our 3 highest years of giving to the foundation in our history. And I think it's really a testament to the strength of the Jewish community here in Pittsburgh, but also people's desire to help the community when it's in need. So while I hope that there aren't crises like these in the future, I can certainly say that how we respond to those crises when they arise is certainly something that's noticed by our supporters. And to the extent we're able to address those crises in an efficient, trustworthy way, that will, in order to the benefit of our community through deepened relationships, increased financial support, and a strengthening of our community.
Thank you, Dan. We have a little bit of time, and we wanted to set aside some time for questions, Q&A, and I'll just open it up if you want to raise your hand. I think there's a button you can press to raise your hand. If not, if I don't see you, because I can only see a few faces at a time, just unmute and ask your question, please. Yeah.
Well, I'll jump in since nobody's asking a question. I'll jump in with a question from yesterday that I think was apropos. Somebody said, well, what are you doing to integrate your fundraising, and how are you doing that? And one of the things we have worked on is making total resource development something that we're focused on. So number one, at our board, at board meetings, we look to a dashboard to see how we're doing. And whereas we used to just look simply at the campaign, we now look at the campaign and the foundation, and not just dollars into the foundation, but also expectancies, where people have committed to make planned gifts for the community. So we track that. We're part of the Grinspan Life and Legacy program, so we've come up with ways to put in values for expected gifts. We also work with all of our development professionals to come up with goals, what we call SMART goals, strategic, measurable, and all that stuff, where responsibilities for foundation development people include campaign and other development activities, as do campaign development officers. They likewise have foundation responsibilities and other fundraising goals related to our tax credits and supplemental giving and things like that. So we've really tried to integrate up and down the idea that everybody at the Federation is part of our development team and can raise money, not just for the campaign, but other areas as well.
I have a question.
Sure.
Annie from Jewish Federation in Kansas City. First of all, thank you so much for your informative presentation. Just curious to know, in the case studies that you presented, with the exception of the third case study with the family that's been involved at the Federation for quite a while, and in the case of the other two, was there some sort of a moves management plan set up for the both of them, or were they just at some point inspired to give and that's what happened? Just curious to know how that evolved, those two situations evolved for you.
Right. Well, yes, in both cases, they're part of a moves management plan. As part of our strategic plan, we have now engaged a new director of development operations, and we're looking to do even more in terms of systematizing how we track those moves management plans. But in both cases, and with all of our efforts, what we do is similar to probably most federations, where we identify people in terms of their capacity and their interest in giving. And we work to identify what the goal is to move them on that artful journey, as Bill Sturtevant writes. So in both cases, these are people who we'd worked with over years, moving them towards these gifts. So it's very much part of the moves management process.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to what Dan's saying, in all these cases, where we're trying to get people to give, especially major gifts when we're talking, foundation and even many, and you can't say all these are major donors when they're leaving these enormous bequests, because often the people you least suspect are your largest foundation donors, at least we've seen. However, what we're trending in the future, and Dan can touch on that as well, is that some of our strongest supporters are beginning to consider and give to our foundation more than ever before, based on that trust. But when it comes to our donors, we do, we track our touches, we analyze it regularly. Often the supervisors will work with their specific supervisees to see how these things are going. Everyone has their own. There are systems. We have a system where we're all required to do, the touches and all that, but everyone has their own way of perhaps following up with their individual. And so yeah, I mean, we did bring in Bill Sturdivant several years ago to do some training for us. So hopefully that addressed what you asked. I see that Jill asked a question in the chat about the type of training we did for our professional staff to support total financial resource development. In the past, we have done some training. Dan is a wealth of information and has done some significant foundation training. We do, at least for the last several years, in our solicitor training, both our volunteers and professionals. We go through the solicitor training, but we also have a planned giving component. When it comes to our volunteers, it's a little more difficult because they're not, well, one is not very many donors will want to sit with a volunteer present to talk about their wealth and their, how much their net worth is. But we do train them to sort of be able to open the doors or at least plant the seeds. When it comes to the staff, we want to grow that even more. We do have resources on staff. Dan spends a pretty decent amount of time consulting and working with a number of our staff that even if they have an affinity group that they're responsible for, everyone has planned giving goals, and we work together. We've done some training. I think we need to do more. We do send people to conferences, and then we have some strategy that often I'm involved in one-on-ones with the individuals, or Dan, or some of the other senior people. But we just literally talked about this morning. We have like many federations, we lost a certain percentage of our staff during the pandemic, and we have a lot of newer staff, and we visit our training again to these multi-level asks. It's not just the campaign, not just the foundation, not just tax credits, perhaps even corporate giving and supplemental giving with specific folks. So I hope that answered your question, Jill.
And I'll add one thing to that, Brian,
Sure.
if I may, is that we're also really looking to think about ask amounts for the foundation too, and be a little bit more strategic with that. We started with our mega mission this past June, and for a small percentage of participants, we really not just having an ask amount for the annual campaign, but really having an ask for, whether we thought they should open up, be a Loge or, donor advised fund or this or that. So really, again, trying to also incorporate Jedi and the foundation side, kind of on the back end in terms of being able to succinctly put together ask amounts so that can be easily communicated to the fundraiser as well. So that's a big work in progress, but something that we're hoping can also give a more holistic view, of the donor as we're talking to them.
Any other questions before we wrap up? I don't want to ignore anyone.
I think we're good in the chat.
Great. So really, this is a Thursday afternoon at the end of an insane week, and just really wanted to thank everyone for participating in this session. Hope it was and will be helpful to you and your communities, given the ongoing challenges that we're all facing. Hopefully you have taken away some of these themes and the power of what we believe is important, such as clear and consistent communication, donor trust and loyalty, urgency, emergency to augment our base, and lastly, relationships. That's really the essence of what we're about. But feel free to be in touch with any one of us with any further questions. We're always happy to engage. As we say in Pittsburgh, onward and upward, and want to wish you wonderful success in your fundraising efforts this year. Our work is holy and the impact is beyond moving. And as I found this quote from our sage Hillel, who once said, "A single candle can light 1,000 more without diminishing itself." And this, in fact, is the essence of the power of our collective efforts. So wishing all of you and your loved ones a happy, a healthy, and a sweet new year. Shana Tova.
Bye, everyone.